I want you to visualize a specific kind of misery. It's a misery we have all felt, but we rarely talk about it because, well, it's quiet. You're in a conference room. The lighting is that aggressive fluorescent white that makes everyone look a little tired. The slide deck is beautiful. Font is crisp. The presenter, they've been talking for 45 minutes straight, just moving through charts and graphs. They finally stop, look around the expansive mahogany table, and ask any questions. And nothing. Just silence. Maybe a polite cough. Everyone nods. The meeting ends 5 minutes early.
It feels surprisingly good in the moment, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It feels efficient. Like, wow, we are so aligned, we don't even need to talk. We are a well-oiled machine.
Exactly. It feels safe. Nobody looks stupid. Nobody started an argument. And I get to go grab a coffee before my next call. But according to the research we are tearing into today, that feeling of safety, it's a hallucination.
A dangerous one.
Today we are doing a deep dive into a fascinating, slightly terrifying text called The Power of Questions in Healthy Organizations. It frames this exact scenario not as efficiency, but as a symptom of a disease. The source material is structured as this profound dialogue between a teacher and a student, and it effectively argues that the silence in your meeting room is actually the sound of a company slowly dying.
It's a heady premise, I know. But when you peel back the layers, the core argument is incredibly compelling. The text calls this state a fear-based order. It suggests that if you have order without questions, you aren't disciplined. You're just scared.
And our mission today is to figure out why that silence happens, why breaking it is the only way to actually grow up professionally.
And we have a specific toolkit from the source on how to ask questions that actually fix things rather than, just annoy people.
Let's start with that term, fear-based order. That phrase really stuck with me because usually when I think of a chaotic, fearful workplace, I think of screaming matches or
People throwing staplers.
right, or running around with their hair on fire. I don't think of a quiet, polite room.
And that's the trick. The teacher in the text makes a crucial distinction between peace and frozen peace. When a workplace is orderly simply because no one dares to speak, that order is maintained by very specific anxieties. It's not just a general bad vibe, it's structural.
So what are the specific fears driving this? Because if I'm sitting there nodding, I don't feel afraid in the survival sense. I just feel passive.
Well, there's the obvious one, the fear of looking stupid, the classic imposter syndrome driver.
Of course.
If I ask a question, I might reveal that I don't know something everyone else seems to know. But the source goes deeper. There's the fear of causing confusion, like, if I ask this, I'm going to derail the agenda.
Oh, I felt that one. You don't want to be the guy who drags the meeting past the hour mark just to satisfy your own curiosity.
Right, you don't want to be the friction. But the deepest fear the source identifies, and this is where it gets a little philosophical, is the fear of the truth.
That sounds a bit dramatic. The fear of the truth, like we can't handle the reality.
It sounds dramatic, but think about it technically. The source uses this great metaphor of a pipeline. Imagine an organization as a massive plumbing system. The water flowing through the pipes is reality, raw information, data, actual problems, customer feedback. Questions are the mechanism, the pumps, that transport that reality from one department to another.
So if nobody asks questions,
The pump stops. You get a blockage. And here is where the imagery gets visceral. The source says that when truth gets stuck because of silence, it doesn't just vanish, it ferments.
ferments, that implies a chemical change. It turns into something else.
Exactly. It turns into rot. Think about a project you've worked on where everyone knew there was a flaw in the plan. Maybe the deadline was impossible or the software was buggy, but nobody asked about it in the kickoff meeting because the boss was so excited. That flaw didn't go away.
No, it definitely didn't. It probably festered.
It fermented into rumors. It fermented into back-channel Slack messages where people complained to each other. Eventually, it ferments into a massive failure 6 months later.
And by then, it's toxic.
It becomes poisonous to the culture. The truth was always there, but because it wasn't circulated through questions, it became a weapon rather than a tool. The silence created a space for the problem to grow in the dark.
It's interesting because this connects to what the text calls the move fast trap. We see this constantly in tech and startups. Bias for action, move fast and break things.
Yes.
There is this almost aggressive, allergic reaction to questions because they slow us down. Don't overthink it, just ship it.
It's the don't complicate it mindset. It feels very modern, very agile.
Right. But the source counters this. The teacher argues that if you are moving forward without asking questions, you aren't actually moving, you're just running blindly.
That's the distinction between speed and velocity. Speed is just distance over time. You can run 100 miles an hour in a circle. Velocity is speed with direction. Questions give you the direction. Without them, you might be sprinting at record speed, but you could be sprinting directly off a cliff.
Or sprinting into a brick wall.
Exactly. And the source argues that stopping to ask where are we going isn't slowing down. It's calibrating. It ensures that the speed is actually useful.
I want to pivot to the psychology of why we accept the blind sprinting. Why do we just sit there? There's a line in the text that I actually circled 3 times. It's a phrase I've heard friends say over drinks. I've probably said it myself. They don't pay me to think.
It's the ultimate cynical defense mechanism. I just execute. They don't pay me to think. I just do what I'm told.
We usually treat that as a joke or maybe a sign of burnout. But the teacher in this dialogue takes a much harsher view. They call that statement a declaration of surrender.
Surrender of what?
A surrender of adulthood.
That stings. So if I keep my head down and just do my tasks, I'm being professionally immature. According to this framework, yes. The source draws a hard line here. It defines immaturity in the workplace, not as being young or inexperienced, but as the assertion, I am right so I don't need to ask, or I am just a cog so I don't need to ask. Both are closed loops. They shut out the world.
So what does professional maturity look like then?
Adulthood, in this context, is defined by the courage to ask, could I be wrong? Or do I fully understand? It's the willingness to engage with the unknown.
So asking a question isn't a sign of weakness. It's actually the primary indicator that you are an adult who accepts responsibility for the outcome.
Precisely. Immaturity demands certainty. It wants to be told exactly what to do. Adulthood accepts ambiguity and tries to navigate it. When you surrender that adulthood, you end up with the typical meeting scenario the text describes. I think we should walk through that anatomy because it is painfully relatable.
Let's do it. I'll set the scene. Step 1, the monologue. Someone in power, a manager, a VP, is broadcasting information. They are reading the slides.
Right. It's one-way traffic. There is no exchange, just transmission.
Step 2, the reflexive nod. I catch myself doing this constantly. I'm not even listening to the content. I'm just physically signaling, I am a good employee, I am listening, I am agreeable.
You're signaling compliance, not comprehension. Your body language is saying yes, but your brain might be completely offline.
And step 3, the swallow. You have a doubt. A little alarm bell rings in your head. Maybe you spot a typo in the budget or a logical flaw in the strategy, but you physically gulp it down. You suppress the instinct to speak.
And the result, as the text puts it, is the illusion of alignment. Everyone leaves the room thinking, okay, we're good. Everyone nodded. But actually, nobody understands anyone. The leader thinks the team is on board, and the team thinks the leader is driving them off a cliff.
And the reason we swallow that question, and this is crucial, is because of the labels we're terrified of. We talked about fear earlier, but let's get specific on the social cost.
In a silent culture, questions aren't viewed as neutral tools. They are viewed as weapons. If you ask, why are we doing it this way? You don't get labeled as curious. You get labeled as the troublemaker.
Or the opposition.
Right. You become a problem to be managed. Or if it's a technical question, you get labeled incompetent. Why is he asking that? Shouldn't know that by now.
Or disloyal. That's the one that kills it for me. If the boss presents a perfect plan and I ask about a flaw, it feels like I'm attacking their leadership. It feels personal.
And that brings us to the root cause. We've talked about the symptoms, the silence, the fermentation, the immature surrender. But what is driving the machine? The source boils it down to 2 very human drivers, power and ego.
It always comes back to ego, doesn't it?
It does. But let's look at the power dynamic first. In many traditional organizations, leadership is built on a facade of omniscience. The leader believes, I am the boss because I have the answers. My value is my knowledge. I am the prophet.
So if a subordinate asks a question that stymies the boss, it's not just an inquiry, it's a status threat.
It pierces the armor. It suggests the leader isn't omniscient. It exposes a gap. So leaders subconsciously suppress questions to protect that image of perfection.
And the ego side.
And then you have the ego side, which applies to everyone, not just leaders. The ego is an optimization machine, but it's optimized for the short term. It wants to avoid pain right now.
Right now.
Exactly. Admitting, I don't know, stings.
Yeah.
It's a tiny microdose of shame. The ego will do anything to avoid that sting in the moment, even if it means causing a massive disaster for the company 6 months later.
We sacrifice the long-term survival of the group to protect our short-term pride. That is the ego paradox.
That's it in a nutshell. But the source points out that this isn't inevitable. It's not just human nature that we have to accept. They bring up some heavy hitters in business history to prove that you can be successful and still ask questions. Specifically, Michael Dell and Jack Welch.
Jack Welch is an interesting example because he wasn't exactly known for being a soft, cuddly guy. He was neutron Jack. He was intense.
Right, he was brutal in his own way. But the source highlights that Welch didn't view leadership as knowing everything. He believed the true leader was the person who asked the most questions and the best questions. He flipped the metric. If you're the boss and you're doing all the talking, you're failing.
He made curiosity the metric of power rather than knowledge.
Exactly. And Michael Dell's philosophy was about competitive advantage. He saw information flow as the edge. If you stop questions, you stop the flow of reality from the market to the executives, you lose your agility. So for him, silence wasn't efficient. It was a loss of signal.
Okay, so we know silence is bad. We know ego gets in the way. But the source takes a turn here that I wasn't expecting. It moves away from organizational theory and gets into, I guess I call it mechanics or neurology.
It's the mechanics of thought. This is my favorite insight from the teacher. They describe a question as a literal switch for the human brain.
Break that down. How is it a switch?
Compare a statement to a question. If I look at you and say, action helps learning, what does your brain do?
It's just kind of files it away. It's a complete sentence. Period at the end. Done. I might nod.
It's passive. It's data entry. Your brain says, okay, received. No further processing required.
Mm-hmm.
But if I change the grammar, if I look at you and ask, how does action help us learn?
Yeah, I can feel the difference. My brain instantly starts looking for files. I'm thinking about times I learned by doing. I'm formulating an answer. I'm engaged.
The syntax forces engagement. The source argues that a question creates a neural path that wasn't there before. It wakes up the room. You can literally change the energy of a meeting just by changing periods to question marks.
This leads to the concept of shared ownership mentioned in the text. This is a big shift. When I make a statement, I own it. When I ask a question, we own it.
That's the shift. If a leader barks an order, go fix the marketing, the success of that order sits entirely on the leader's shoulders. The team is just executing. But if the leader asks, how do we fix the marketing? They are inviting the team to carry the burden. It moves the dynamic from compliance, I'll do what you said, to contribution, I'll help figure this out.
However, and this is a big however, there is a trap here. Not all questions are benevolent. I've definitely been in meetings where a question felt like a sniper shot.
The interrogation trap.
Yeah.
The source is very clear on this. You have to distinguish between questions that empower and questions that diminish.
Empower versus diminish. Give me an example of a diminishing question.
Why is this report late?
Oof, yeah, that puts me on the defensive immediately. I'm shrinking. I'm coming up with excuses.
You're shrinking. The goal of that question is to pin blame or expose a failure. It's looking backward. An empowering version might be, what obstacles are blocking the report and how could we clear them?
That makes me shine. It treats me as a problem solver, not a problem. It's looking forward.
Exactly. One checks for guilt, the other checks for solutions. The intent matters just as much as the syntax. You can't just put a question mark at the end of an insult and call it leadership.
So let's get practical. We have listeners who are probably thinking, okay, I buy it. Silence is dangerous, but I have a scary boss, or my team is super passive. How do we break the seal? What is the toolkit?
The source gives a roadmap, and it starts with a prerequisite. Before you teach techniques, the leader has to give permission.
Permission for what? To speak?
Permission to not know. If a leader pretends they know everything, everyone else will pretend too. The leader has to be the first one to say, I don't have the answer to this, let's figure it out. That creates the safety.
Okay, assuming we can establish a baseline of safety, or at least try to, the teacher outlines 3 specific types of questions to get the ball rolling. I want to drill into these because they are super actionable.
Let's do it. The first type is open questions. The source defines the goal here as to see broadly.
So this is to fight tunnel vision.
Right. Imagine a team is locking in on one solution way too early. Instead of saying, I don't think that will work, which causes conflict, you ask an open question. Are there other perspectives we haven't seen? Or who else should we hear from on this?
I like that. It's a great way to disagree without being disagreeable. You aren't saying this idea is bad. You're asking, are there other ideas? It invites diversity. What's the second type?
The second is clarifying questions. The goal is to see correctly. This is your defense against that fermentation we talked about.
This is the plumbing maintenance.
Exactly. You ask, is this the root problem or just a symptom? Or when you say soon, what specific date do you mean? It forces precision. It stops people from nodding along to vague concepts. It makes sure we are all looking at the same reality.
And the third type.
Responsibility
Yeah.
questions. The goal is to share the load.
This goes back to the our job concept.
Yes, instead of asking, who screwed this up,
Yeah.
you ask, what is my part in this? What is our part? It stops the blame game and focuses everyone on their agency. What can we do right now?
So we have an open to see broadly, clarifying to see correctly, and responsibility to share the load. That's a solid framework. But the source saves the heavy artillery for the end, the magic question.
This is my favorite part of the entire text. The teacher claims this single question is enough to save a project, a meeting, or even a career.
Lay it on us.
The question is, what are we assuming right now that we haven't verified?
What are we assuming right now that we haven't verified?
It's devastatingly simple. But think about every business disaster you've read about. WeWork, Theranos, or even just a product launch that flopped.
They all ran on assumptions. We assume the tech works. We assume people want this. We assume the regulatory approval is coming.
And because of the silence trap, nobody challenged the assumption. It became a fact. This question cuts right through that. It doesn't accuse anyone of lying. It just asks, what are we treating as a fact that is actually just a guess?
It acts like a safety valve. It forces the room to pause and actually look at the foundation they are building on.
It prevents the organization from running blindly off the cliff. If you only take one thing from this deep dive, take that question. Write it on a Post-it note in your notebook. Use it when everyone seems a little too certain.
So let's zoom out. We've gone from the fear of silence to the neurology of the brain down to specific scripts. What is the big takeaway here?
The takeaway is that silence is not peace. If you are a leader or just a team member and your meetings are perfectly quiet and efficient, that is not a sign of success. It's a warning light on the dashboard. It means the pipes are clogged. Questions clarify, and clarity brings freedom.
I love the core philosophy the teacher leaves us with. It was something like, organizations that want to grow must dare to ask.
Humans who want to grow must dare to admit. That's the crux. Asking isn't just a business tactic. It's a growth mechanism. It's how we mature. The source says, where there is no daring to ask, there is no daring to grow. You cannot have innovation, you cannot have improvement without the vulnerability of a question.
It really redefines strength. We grow up thinking strength is having the answers. We think being an adult means knowing what to do. But real strength is having the guts to admit you don't, and then asking the question that finds the truth.
Immaturity says, I know. Maturity asks, do I?
So here is our challenge to you. The next time you are in a room, maybe it's tomorrow morning, maybe it's right now, and you feel that urge to stay quiet, you feel that pressure to just nod along and keep the peace because it's easier. I want you to ask yourself a question before you ask theirs.
Ask yourself, am I choosing my own comfort over the life of the organization?
Because that's the choice. Silence is comfortable, but questions are vital.
And remember the magic phrase, what are we assuming right now that we haven't verified? Drop that into your next meeting and see if the room wakes up.
It might just save the day. Thanks for diving deep with us. Keep asking, and we'll see you next time.